Welcome. This is Rudy Giuliani, and we're back with Rudy's Common Sense. Today, we're going to deal with a subject that is probably on your mind and certainly on many people's minds, which is, should they take the vaccine or should they allow their children to take the vaccine if they haven't done it already? And there's probably a lot of valid things to consider and probably a lot of invalid things to consider. I can think of nobody better to help us sort our way through this than my co-host on Uncovering the Truth, Dr. Maria Ryan. And Dr. Maria, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here today. I'm glad we're talking about vaccines and COVID-19 in general, because a lot of parents are confused, a lot of adults are confused. But I want to start out with talking about my background.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. This is like we do with a witness on the witness stand. The first thing when you go on, if you're an expert witness, please state your credentials, doctor.
Absolutely. So my first 6 years of college, I have a master's degree in the science of nursing, and I'm board certified as a nurse practitioner. And most of my practice has been in emergency medicine, but I've done everything. I've covered for a nurse practitioner in an office, so as a provider for chronic illnesses. Like I said, I worked in the emergency department as an emergency provider, and I've delivered babies. I've covered as a neonatologist in taking care of the baby after the mother delivered. So I have a varied background. But what is a nurse practitioner? Some people hear the word nurse and they think, oh, you take orders from a physician. Depending on what state you work in, I'm from New Hampshire, so I'm an independent provider. So I could put a shingle on my office and I am your provider. You don't see a physician. I am the provider.
So if I have a cold or if I have a bad back or if I have a fever, I call you, come to you, and you take care of it.
I take care of everything. Nurse practitioners now even act as hospitalists. I know in my hospital, I had a nurse practitioner who was one of the best hospitalists we've ever had. And I've worked independently in emergency departments, and that's where most of my background is. The last 2 years, so in total 8 years of college, was my PhD in healthcare administration. So I'm a former president and CEO of a hospital.
And during COVID.
And during COVID.
Until recently.
Yeah.
From the beginning of COVID up until a few months ago.
Right.
So that they understand that you have an experience with COVID itself. And
most of my career has been in acute care hospitals. And as an emergency department provider, I had to know a lot about viruses. You have to know a lot about a lot of things as an emergency department provider. So the vaccines, what is all the controversy lately? You know, everybody wants hard, cold facts. And this is something that's important for people to know. None of our numbers are absolute. In everything, there's going to be a margin of error. So if you hear one provider on a news show saying some number and another provider saying another number, it's not that they're lying. We're trying to do the best we can. And when we talk about adverse reactions to a vaccine, here's the limitation. It's a voluntary reporting system to the CDC. It's called Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. We ask providers to please report information. We ask people in America to report your adverse reaction. So there's always the numbers are going to be low.
So that strikes me as not the way it should be, because this vaccine, and I think this also confuses people. Some know it, some don't. This is not really completely approved.
No, it's under emergency use authorization.
This would be under normal circumstances, like when you get an exception because somebody is dying and they want to try something that's experimental.
Correct.
So technically, all of these vaccines are still experimental.
Correct. And the thing that makes this so experimental with Pfizer and Moderna is its new mRNA technology, which is messenger RNA. I'm going to take everybody back to their biology classes in high school and college. But that messenger RNA has been inside of our bodies forever. And what the scientists have done is they've replicated it. It is ingenious. They've been working on it for a very long time, decades. But this is the first time tested in human beings.
So when you say, take me through just quickly the normal process where then it would no longer be experimental and the CDC could say perfectly safe, or perfectly safe except there's a 2% chance of whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, with traditional vaccines, in the old days, we used to actually use a live virus.
I remember that.
But small amounts, so your body would have immune reaction to it and recognize it if you ever ran into that virus again. And then we went with attenuated viruses that were not live, genetically made, and then you would have a response to it. Like I said, the two, Pfizer and Moderna, are the ones with this mRNA technology. It is quite ingenious that they were able to replicate what's inside your body. Here's the problem. We don't know long-term sequelae, what will happen with this.
Well, you have to give us another word, but sequelae.
Sequelae is reactions and
consequences.
Cascade. Yes, consequences is a great word. So this messenger RNA goes inside your body, goes to the different cells, and it produces that spike protein. So it can produce it in the brain, in the heart, anywhere. And this has been the problem with typically the younger women in their 20s and 30s who got thrombosis, a blood clot in their brain or their heart from the spike protein.
So the spike is one of the unusual things about COVID, right?
Correct.
If I recall correctly, when we were first learning about COVID, one of the reasons it was so dangerous was because it had these spikes, which is, and that's why it's called coronavirus, right?
Not necessarily.
Because it looks like a corona?
Reason. No, that's not. The coronavirus family's been around since the beginning of time.
So this is a coronavirus that has spikes on it.
Yep, a spike protein, which is an unusual characteristic.
And does that mean it can more effectively enter the cell because of the spike?
It just makes it a little bit more dangerous in treating. And of course, we all know that it was manipulated with the gain of function work that was done in the University of North Carolina and then in the Wuhan lab of virology.
So what does the spike add to the virus itself? So you have a coronavirus without spikes, you have a coronavirus. What does the spike add to it?
It's just new to us because it was novel. So it was just the treatment. How do we work with this spike protein? So going back to the vaccine. So the vaccine, the Pfizer and Moderna, make your body produce those spike proteins, which can go anywhere. You don't have control over it. Allegedly, what they hope happens is that injection in the mRNA in producing spike proteins will be temporary. That once you do, your body produces a spike protein, your immune system now comes, recognizing that as foreign, attacks it, and has that genetic makeup in your body now from now on.
This would be a good time to take a short break.
I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532.
Thank you for coming back, and let's proceed with our discussion with Dr. Ryan. The immune system is doing that for you all the time. It's fighting off various viruses and other things that are happening. And then there are certain viruses that it's not capable of fighting off effectively enough.
Well, if it's new or not, or you get sick from it, then you produce antibodies. Like you had COVID, and now you have antibodies. So if you're exposed to COVID, the likelihood of you getting COVID again is not going to happen, because those antibodies will recognize it and fight against it. So it's a great system we have in our own bodies, but you still could get it. It doesn't mean you can't get it in the beginning. You can't fight it and produce antibodies until you have it.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. So what does the
The mRNA is a messenger RNA.
RNA.
It's a little different than DNA, which is double-stranded. RNA is single-stranded. So the messenger RNA will go and tell your cells to produce a spike protein. And from there, we rely on our natural immune system to say, oh, there's a foreigner. I'm going to create antibodies to fight against it. And then the messenger, it's theorized, and this is the hope of the scientists, that the mRNA injected will then be done. So, because can you imagine if it stays in your system, then you continue to produce this spike protein, it can be very dangerous. So it's theorized then it will be destroyed.
And both of them are the same in terms of the chemical?
Overall, yes. You mean Pfizer and Moderna?
Yeah.
Correct. Overall, it's
they're basically the same.
Yes.
And really, the science or the objective is to produce antibodies that I developed because I had the illness.
You did it naturally, and that's the best way.
Are there people that might just have the antibodies?
Not unless they're exposed.
Okay.
You have to
So
be exposed. You don't just have them in your body.
Somehow you have to have been exposed. Maybe you have them and you don't know it because you don't know that you had the disease,
That's
particularly young
correct.
people. Right?
Yes, and here's the thing about all this push for a certain percentage of the population to be vaccinated, and then you reach herd immunity or population immunity. Nowhere are Dr. Fauci or some other scientists talking about the people who have already had COVID.
Why?
It doesn't make any logical sense.
Maybe you can't sell anything to them?
Yeah, maybe, the vaccine
they
people are
already have
making
it,
money,
so-
right? We know the NIH has contracts with Moderna and they get a piece of the profit.
Since they can't do the long-term test that we would like to have, how does somebody responsibly make the decision? I should take the risk of whatever might happen 2-3 years from now as we find out more about it, or I shouldn't take it.
It's difficult. And as a provider with an adult patient, I would lay out the facts, and it's called an informed decision. And then that patient would make the decision after the provider, in the best of his or her knowledge, lays out all the facts. The problem is we don't have long-term studies with this mRNA. So it is, the best of our ability. What's been in the news is myocarditis with children. And since we've allowed, under emergency use authorization, teenagers to get the vaccines, we've been seeing an uptake of myocarditis.
Is there an age we're at right now?
12 and up.
So nobody below 12 can get it yet?
Correct.
Has anybody gotten it experimentally below 12?
There has been a few studies with both vaccines under 12. They were having a hard time getting the right amount of numbers for it.
So what's happening with 12
Yes.
and up?
12 and up, especially in teenage boys, we're seeing a phenomenon called myocarditis. And so this is about the heart and the myocardium. The myocardium is the muscle of the heart, and it's becoming inflamed, especially in teenage boys and young adult boys. More of them are getting this myocarditis. It can be life-threatening. And it's happening mainly after the second shot. Within 3 to 5 days, the patient develops chest pain, shortness of breath, and just a general feeling of malaise.
The same numbers for both vaccines, for both?
Yeah, pretty much. It was in the beginning much more reported with the Pfizer, but I'm not sure if that's the big spread that it was in the past. Some people will look at it and say, well, myocarditis, the numbers are still low. With that volunteer reporting system, we've only heard about 1,200 in the United States, despite all the shots we've given. That's so low. So are the risk and benefits worth it? Well, in Jerusalem, they were giving 12 and up a lot sooner than we were in America. So their numbers are a lot higher in their sickness, and they've had deaths. As far as I know, at this point in time, we've only had one death in America from myocarditis or pericarditis. Pericarditis is there's a thin lining around the heart that has fluid.
Given the
fluid.
number of vaccines administered to the 12 and up group, cohort, I guess we call it, right?
Yes, very good.
And is it a number yet that's significant?
No, except what is the risk of myocarditis? It can be life-threatening, or pericarditis. And what is the risk that happens when this same cohort gets COVID-19? Very low, right? It's statistically not even significant that they'll get serious disease from it. So jumping back to the foreign countries, Germany has now banned anybody getting a shot under 18 unless the physician feels the risk and benefits outweigh not getting it. The UK has totally banned it. They said where the CDC in America was very slow to say there was a causal relationship between the COVID-19 vaccine and myocarditis, the UK is blatantly saying there's a causal link, so no more giving it to any teenagers.
Would you regard these as very, very responsible organizations that are making these decisions?
Yes.
Yeah, these are not
political in any way. Right? No, not third world countries, nor politically motivated. Right. There's been we've honestly
we're
concerned
had a real
up
problem.
Here. Yeah. So we have the myocarditis in teenagers, young adult, especially male, that you have to really think before you would agree to getting the shot.
And is it only males? Is that banned in Europe?
For all teenagers.
For all teenagers,
yes.
Even though it's more frequent in males.
Correct.
So in Germany, 12 and up, you got to get special permission from the doctor.
Special permission.
In London or in UK, can't happen.
They've stopped it altogether. I believe the Netherlands has stopped it.
And I gather
altogether.
that the special conditions would be if you have some of the
problem.
Some of the things that create complications with COVID. So, and are we able yet to do like a real statistical comparison, or hasn't there been enough experience? In other words, the percentage of people who die from COVID 12 and up is X. The percentage of people who get myocarditis and die is Y.
Yeah, and again, this is where we don't have absolute numbers, so it's a little bit hard because of the voluntary reporting system. We depend on the physician remembering, oh God, I have to report this patient I just admitted to the hospital with myocarditis. And, they get busy, they forget to tell their staff to fill out the form, but the form can be filled out by a family member. But most people don't know that if they have severe adverse reaction to any vaccine, even prior to COVID-19, that they could self-report their condition to the CDC. And it has to be an adverse reaction. Right now, we know, because we're wanting your immune system to have a response to the vaccines. You may get a fever, you may have a sore arm for a few days, you may, feel generally achy for a few days. So we know those are normal things to expect. An adverse reaction are those things like myocarditis, having prolonged weakness in your legs, which brings me to Gillian-Barre syndrome. So you may remember in the 70s when we had the swine flu epidemic.
Sure, yes.
Yeah. So that vaccine caused quite a bit of Gillian-Barre syndrome. This syndrome starts with typically tingling, numbness feeling in your feet. It's an ascending paralysis. So instead of starting this way, normally it would start in your feet, your ankles, and then goes up. Your legs start to feel numb. You have profound weakness, and in severe cases, it goes all the way up, and it causes not just weakness, but paralysis, which will include your diaphragm, and you have to go on a ventilator to breathe. Those are very severe cases. Now, Guillain-Barré syndrome in itself is very rare, about 20,000 cases a year in the United States. I had an unusual thing that happened in my hospital, which is in the North Country of New Hampshire, where we in the region had 5 cases.
And that would be a lot for that small population.
Crazy,
right?
Very, very odd. Never was a causal relationship found with anything, whether there was a virus going around in the community.
And when was this?
We didn't know that. That was approximately 6 years ago. So the CDC and the FDA have put a warning on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because they've seen it with that particular vaccine, which is traditionally done, not an mRNA vaccine, that they've been seeing an increase in the Gillian-Barre syndrome.
With the Johnson & Johnson, is it the first injection or the second or both?
Well, Johnson & Johnson is one shot.
I'm sorry.
Yep,
Johnson &
that's okay.
Johnson is the one shot.
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, and it's less effective as a result of that.
It is overall less effective.
So
but
that
still,
would also then enter into the calculation of whether you use it.
Yeah.
Because this is all in a way, it's all mathematics.
Yeah.
But not solid mathematics.
Yeah.
Mathematics based on estimates and informed, I'm not going to say guesses, but
Yeah. We're trying to do our best we can. Like this
Yeah, I
was
think-
a
I think
novel
that-
virus.
we'll be back in a few minutes.
How much equity do you have in your home? 50,000? 100,000? More? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes. Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's title that's online. They forge your signature stating you sold your home, and they take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value free. Go to HometitleLock.com. That's HometitleLock.com.
Thank you for returning.
As a professional, what concerns me is the transparency or lack thereof that I say because I'm part of that community,
Right.
that
But-
Dr. Fauci and other people have been given information to Americans.
But I can see some of the distortion that legitimate people will be worried about. So now we've been speaking for 15 minutes or so, and we've talked about all the complications of it.
Correct.
And they're all real,
Yeah.
and they all can happen.
Yeah, right.
Except the percentage of them is, in comparison to the amount of time we've just spent on it, very, very low.
It is low. We know it's underreported. But again, is that risk worth it if you naturally got COVID and no long-term sequelae? Meaning no continuing. You have COVID, you have the symptoms, you're sick, but then for the rest of your life, you're fine. We really don't know whether for the rest of your life you'll be fine if you've already got symptoms. So Senator Ron Johnson has had a few people go on national media talking about their
You could
symptoms.
be the bravest man in the Senate.
He is really brave because we do need to talk about it. People need to
Oh,
make
he's
an
being attacked just
informed-
because he wants to give people information. I guess the concern is that if you give them the information, there'll be an overreaction. Therefore, it has to be balanced. But that you have to assume that people are intelligent enough
right.
that they realize that in what percentage of the cases does it work? 98,
Yeah.
99?
So I am not this term, anti-vaxxer. I was on another show recently and the person interviewing me said he wasn't an anti-vaxxer, and I know you're not an anti-vaxxer, but what is your feeling with these vaccines? Overall, I think that they're safe and effective, but I don't know what I don't know, right? I don't know with this mRNA what the long-term things will be. I've talked to a few patients who 4 months after the vaccine, they're still having a lot of numbness in their feet. Their legs are so weak, they can't go to their job anymore.
These are adults.
So I would give my patients all the information and allow them to make an informed decision. So I make no, you shouldn't, you should with adults. I have a different perspective with children. We know that we haven't been really transparent about children and their ability to get COVID or to spread it. they seem to be less likely even to get it or spread it. They can get COVID and they may have serious effects from it, but the percentage is so low, and certainly the mortality rate is even lower. Like it would be the rarest thing in the world for a young person to die from COVID-19.
When we say young person, we got to 12.
I'm saying anybody under 30.
When you said 12 and up, I guess I was negligent in not saying up to what?
Well, in some of the studies looking at the myocarditis, they're looking at from 12 to like age 24. Some of the studies go up to 30.
So anything below 30.
Yeah, below 30. I particularly do not think anybody under 18 should get the vaccine. I really don't. I don't think there's any need of it. And where this is still experimental with the mRNA technology, why take the risk?
And how many, is there, or is it too fudgy, a death rate for people below 18 who get COVID?
My God, we know all the way up to probably age 70 that the death rate is probably 0.00. You know, it's
how does it compare to the flu?
Low. Now, the flu is typically, again, hits older people most severely, the typical influenza that goes. So it's almost statistically the same.
So
they're mirroring
for a young person, if a young person gets the flu, regular flu, mm-hmm. their chance of dying is no different than if they get COVID. Let's say a person 20 years old, right, we should make it clear that if you have other illnesses, this can be a very different story.
Correct.
Including obese.
Yes, obesity in any age, you can have complications from getting COVID-19.
So would that change your advice to a person 18 and under?
No.
How about somebody 18 and under who has diabetes?
No, it wouldn't change
Why?
my mind. Because again, the risks outweigh it. If you can, number one, as a society, we need to eat healthier, exercise more, keep our weight in check. But I would work with that patient in a different way by keeping them away from other people, trying to be a little more cautious, even though they should have been doing it all along, but at this point, really watching their weight, taking some weight off, exercising, getting outside every day. I think that's how I would handle that patient. And there's nothing wrong with taking vitamins or increase during this time zinc and vitamin D. I do believe that makes a difference.
There is a small death rate for people below 18. Very, very small.
Oh my
Infinitesimal.
God. It is so statistically insignificant.
And
that actually goes up way beyond 18. The mortality rate for COVID-19 only increases above 75 years of age and if you are immunocompromised. That doesn't mean, nothing is absolute. Again, I always feel like I have to put in these caveats that a healthy young person may get COVID-19 and have some problems. I have a great niece who, healthy as all get out, 14 years old, gets COVID, and now it's almost like asthma. She's having to have an inhaler. She gets short of breath.
It's become a chronic illness.
It's become more of a chronic illness right now.
Which is something you want to avoid if you can.
Yeah, it's what you want to avoid. But you have to look at the whole picture, and it is a little bit complicated, but we have to be transparent.
And I think we have to be ready to change this if data indicates we should change
Absolutely.
it. For example, we get to 6 months from now and some other illness emerges.
Yeah.
We've got to be honest enough to
Right.
reveal that illness. Or if we get to 6 months from now and these statistics get lower.
Yeah.
I mean, we see they level off and they don't go any further. But now I'm going to say this, you're not. It sounds to me like they're going to get very angry at me, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not a good bet.
It's been very controversial from the beginning. Their studies were even not very good as far as efficacy. Early on, it was thought it would only be 60% efficacy. But then remember, AstraZeneca and J&J went through all this controversy with young women getting blood clots. And there were some deaths as well. Should we ban it? It was banned for a little bit.
Which one was?
Johnson & Johnson. I don't know if you remember.
I
it was
do.
actually banned for a little bit of a time.
I thought you said AstraZeneca.
That as well. J&J and AstraZeneca,
But not
which we don't use
Pfizer.
AstraZeneca here,
But not Pfizer.
but not Pfizer
And
or
not,
Moderna.
and not Moderna.
No, but those ones had very controversial beginning.
Again,
and
those
now,
mean Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca.
and AstraZeneca.
Not Pfizer, not Moderna.
Correct, because they're new to us. Pfizer and Moderna are totally new. We've never used mRNA technology.
But every day,
human beings.
every day getting a tremendous amount of injections. I mean, it's the body of that you can look to is getting greater and greater.
Yeah. We have to also remember, as we talked about earlier, people who had naturally had COVID. We know in the United States, a very low estimate is over 33 million people. Why do I say it's a low estimate? In the beginning, when this virus first started, we had limited testing capabilities. So if your symptoms look like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck, we would assume you had COVID or influenza. But we would assume you had COVID, tell you to go home, isolate yourself, take Tylenol for aches and pains. So we didn't test them. So all those cases are unconfirmed. We only know that in the United States, the confirmed cases are over 33 million people.
It's a good time to take a short break.
Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY.
Now let's proceed with our very interesting interview with Dr. Maria. So 33 million people
At
we
least.
know had COVID,
Had COVID, so they have antibodies,
of which I'm one of them.
of which you're wonderful.
And President Trump is one of them.
So you can't give it, you can't get it. And there are some studies now starting to come out. There's one out of Cleveland that's saying your antibodies are much more superior to a
that's
person,
nice.
a
Should I feel-
person
should I
who
feel
got
very-
the
very proud?
antibodies. Yeah.
But there must be some common sense to that if it developed naturally, it would be stronger than if it's developed in the laboratory. But who knows? But the reality is, this I guess, is almost a personal question, doctor, although I'm not your patient. So I have had it, and I've been tested for the antibodies. I have the antibodies. And theoretically, at least there's some scientific support for the fact that my antibodies are stronger than the ones that would be produced by medicine.
Correct.
But I've also read that there's more, not necessarily death or illnesses, but more symptoms for somebody who has had COVID and then gets one of the vaccines. Is that true?
I don't know that. That's a very good
But
question.
I've read things here and there that suggest that there would be more complications for me. I don't know if it's true or not.
I don't know if that's true or not. We don't know it's true. I can't make up what
Good,
I don't
I'm glad
know.
you can.
What we
That's
need
something
to
we have
do,
to look at.
just like the way we handled the pandemic and how it became politicized and we weren't giving people information, I take the social media, right? It seemed like they decided, Mark Zuckerberg had an email with Dr. Fauci, and Mark Zuckerberg basically said he would allow whatever Dr. Fauci says about the virus on Facebook, but everybody else got censored. Well, that's not giving people informed information or transparency.
No, there are. I mean, this is obviously not at the stage in which we have anything like definitive scientific conclusions.
No. And I
Because we haven't
happen
had
to
enough
believe
experience.
in human beings, in how bright they are, and they want information, they deserve information. I'm hoping we are going to learn as a nation, not only how we handled the pandemic, which was terrible that people were censored and people didn't get the correct information, but also about the vaccines. Just because you're questioning some things does not mean you're an anti-vaxxer or you should be labeled anything. We need to have these discussions. And I'm disappointed. We have people like you who have had COVID. We don't know how long your antibodies are going to be in your body. I think it could be a lifetime. May not be, but it could be a lifetime. Whereas we're not sure with this mRNA whether this is going to have to be a yearly vaccine. People like you and people who have the vaccine should be called back into the doctor's office every few months and be tested. We need to really follow the science.
But we don't. I mean, for example, you said something that's extraordinary, which I would have thought just naturally would have been done. Do we know how many people have antibodies?
No, we really don't.
Like developed from having the illness?
No.
Shouldn't we know that?
Yeah, and in the beginning I was so encouraged. The federal government was saying, go to your local public health and you'll be able to not only get the vaccine free, but we're going to test for antibodies and test for COVID. So even before the vaccine, we're going to do all this where you're not only going to get tested to see if you have COVID, if you have symptoms, we're also going to test you for antibodies. And we kind of stopped that. We are allowing free testing everywhere for COVID-19, and we're also allowing free...
Well, I found it somewhat questionable. I won't mention the names, but when I had it, and which is now some time ago in the history of this thing, way back in November or December of last year. Yeah. So the vaccine was almost just starting. Not even sure they had given out a vaccine yet. Yeah. They were just about to give it out.
Right.
President was going to take one, and then eventually Harris took one, even though she said she would never take one if it was from Trump. And
as if Trump was making it in the laboratory.
The thing got so political that forget Republican, it got so political, it's disgusting.
Yeah. For
something as serious as this. But my doctor, and you've heard some of this, my doctor said, well, you might as well get the vaccine. Yes, you will have immunity. We don't know how long it will last, but yes, you should take the vaccine. What does it matter? But I kept thinking, because I've gone through in the past getting emergency permission for these experimental medicines for friends. This is not really a tested medicine. If I don't have to take it, isn't it better that I not take it?
Correct.
And shouldn't we know a little bit more about what is the nature of my immunity? If it isn't good, well, then I'll take the vaccine.
Correct.
If it is good, why take an unknown vaccine from the point of view of a year from now, 2 years from now, what the effect of it's going to be?
Right.
And
never mind the argument of resources. When there was very limited vaccine, why give it to someone who's already had COVID?
I was offered the vaccine a long time ago, and I went, got tested, had antibodies, and said, the heck with it, I shouldn't take up a vaccine. I mean, this is crazy.
Right.
So I just think the discussion of this still has leftover political effects to it, so that over here in the United States, we're reluctant to tell anybody about the side effects because they think people will exaggerate it and do away with the vaccine. Whereas in London or in England and in Germany, they're literally telling 12-year-olds not to take it.
Correct.
Now, have we decided with 12-year-olds yet?
No, there is a warning now that just be cautious, and they're starting, meaning the CDC is starting to put out information about myocarditis. But our CDC has continued to say 12 and up should be vaccinated.
Our CDC says 12 and up should be vaccinated. So far, nobody below.
Correct.
And in 2 countries at least, there's actually a ban.
Correct.
On 12 to how old?
I believe it's 12 to 18.
12 to 18, they can't get it at all in England.
Correct.
And they can get it under special circumstances.
In Germany, but I believe Netherlands and Sweden.
A few others like that too?
Yeah, I think many European nations.
So they think we're wrong.
Correct.
In a way, they think we're wrong.
Yeah.
And since they're responsible people, at least that information, now I'm speaking for you, I shouldn't, but as a nurse provider or a doctor, aren't you obligated to tell your patient that?
Yeah. It's called
if
informed
I bring my
consent.
15-year-old in. But people, there's like a pressure. It seems to take it's almost like you're a bad person if you don't take the vaccine.
It's terrible the way they did that with masks.
Now, at least in the category of children, or let's say up to the age of about 20 or 25, there are real questions about this that should be explored before they're pushed into it, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
and it's called informed consent.
is that happening in the U.S., or is there still this enormous pressure just to, jack them?
It's enormous pressure, and what's caused a lot of people to really question it, and they should question, everybody should question what they're taking into their own body, is the lack of transparency. There's so much confusion. There's even conspiracy theories because the way they're handling the lack of information.
How well known is it that in several very responsible European countries, children 12 to 20, 24 are not allowed to take it?
No, I don't think that's widespread information.
Well, people should know that.
They should know that.
But also...
people should also know that the NIH has financial stakes in the vaccines, or at least some of the vaccines.
Doesn't Fauci have a stake in it?
Not, as far as I know, not personally, but it's definitely the NIH. I have a document in 2015 where they kept updating their contract with Moderna, where they would help.
Now, why wasn't that disclosed?
That should be disclosed.
But no, it should have been disclosed a year ago.
Exactly.
When
Because
Moderna
right
first
now,
came
people
out.
look at Dr. Fauci and they say, this guy is a quack, and he's only wants to make rich or make his department rich. And
that may or may not be true.
And it may or may not be true.
But it's definitely exacerbated by the failure to disclose information that...
Exactly. It might be the right thing to take a vaccine, but everybody should have all the information. And people, especially parents, where it's being pushed on their children. I grew up in the era a doctor said something, it was gospel. We now know that every provider doesn't have the same background. People are specialized, and people have different points of view.
Doctors have had very different points of view on this.
Very contrasting.
Although the censorship has made it appear as if, particularly on hydroxychloroquine, almost all of the doctors that I talked to who were practicing doctors, I'm not going to say all, but it almost seemed like all, used it and wanted to use it.
Yeah.
And all the political doctors didn't want to use it.
And that's what they saw on TV. And that's how people get their information. They see multiple doctors saying this is bad, and then they repeat that.
I can't tell you how many doctors told me it's bull.
Yeah.
But in any event, how can we sum this up? How can we sum this up for people having to make a decision where they're getting tremendous pressure to do it, and they're being made to feel as if they're not good citizens? I mean, one of the arguments that's made is, well, you're endangering other people if you don't take the vaccine and take the risk of whatever might happen down the road, which after all is still probably less than some gigantic risk.
Yeah.
You're being unfair to other people because they could get COVID and they may not have the resources you have to combat it.
We may pretty much be near herd immunity. I think people need to fight back with statistics. Again, knowing the caveat is we have underreporting with everything and things are new and our reporting systems aren't really good, but I don't want anyone to be bullied. I think that's shameful to be putting labels on people if they don't.
So you don't feel that someone who refuses to take it is being selfish and is creating a danger for other people?
Absolutely not. We absolutely know. This is where we do have good information about the mortality rate with COVID-19. And if you do have somebody in your family immunocompromised, you should be very careful when you're near that person. Absolutely, like you would have done during influenza season or anything else, that you wash your hands frequently. You may not visit them when, during the pandemic, or visit them in a different way. You're in the next room or by FaceTime. That's normal things that you would do during the influenza season. And yes, you have to protect the immunocompromised and the elderly who are at the highest
Now, as
risk.
to them, should they take the vaccine?
Again, that's a conversation with their physician. or provider, if it's a nurse
But it
practitioner.
would seem to me that the arguments in favor of their
That's
taking
where
it
the
are much
arguments
greater.
in favor of those people taking the vaccine. Yes.
Depending on your age,
Yes.
number one. But even age, a lot of it's going to depend on whether you are immunocompromised. If you have one of the 8 or 10,
Correct.
the 8 or 10.
Yeah.
If you are 80, but in really good health,
Yeah, right.
are you much different than somebody who's 40? I guess a little different.
Yeah.
Than somebody, but not that
Yeah.
much different.
Here's what I would tell patients and the general public to be prepared. I would have in the past pointed them towards scientific publications. And the Lancet would have been one of those. But we know now, right? They ruin their own reputation.
You know these publications
Yeah.
much more than I do, and I've heard of the Lancet over the years.
Yeah.
But I kind of think of it as a
Now we got to throw them
sign
out
of a London left wing.
because they became politicized and didn't.
I think they kill people
Yep.
over
Yep.
hydroxychloroquine.
So in the past, I would have pointed patients to get information not only through a provider, but also through scientific journals, the New England Journal of Medicine and other
But
journals.
most people can't read these things. Most people, I mean, they have to rely on their doctor.
They do have to rely
or their
on their
children with
doctor.
them.
But I would tell people about where to look for information, because you shouldn't look at the internet, and you have to really look. Don't get your source from the Daily Mail. So I would point them. But we now know that's politicized.
Can I balance that Daily Mail thing with don't get your source from the New York Times?
Yes.
I think the Daily Mail would be better than
We
the New
don't
York
even
Times.
think of the New York Times as a legitimate source of anything anymore. But Epic Times and other things. So that's normally what I would do, not only through the provider, look for resources in particular places. The unfortunate part is it seems like all the logical common sense voices are being censored, and some of the scientific journals have been politicized. As what we see happened with the FBI, where unfortunately, it breaks my heart that they're no longer respectable. Unfortunately, that's happening with our own CDC. I was a big proponent of people going to their website, getting information, but they too seem to be a little bit politicized. So we're in a we're in a quandary right now.
What we see is naturally, not naturally, but unnaturally skewed toward get the vaccine, nothing to really worry about. COVID is extraordinarily dangerous, and it's still extraordinarily dangerous. And we should conduct ourselves as such. In fact, with this new variant come along, we may all die anyway.
I've tracked probably 8 different variants. Some have been a little bit, and I'm relying on certain scientists and public health, a little bit more contagious. None have any change from the initial COVID-19 for mortality.
And so far, they all seem to be treatable the same way.
Yeah,
and
we have so many better medications now.
As susceptible to the vaccine.
Yeah, we have so many different modalities as well in our arsenal to treat patients who may have worsening symptoms. We have hydroxychloroquine. We have
what about my steroids?
Steroids, best thing that can happen if you have viral pneumonia.
For about 4 or 5 weeks, I was going to run the marathon, but then it all fell apart.
We've had very quasi results with the remdesivir, but it's another tool in our arsenal. Main thing.
And then the
Regeneron for severe cases. And the main thing is we got to stay healthy, not eat processed foods, exercise.
So in my case, every case is different, but if people want the benefit of it, the 2 things that were deemed the most efficacious was the Regeneron, which I took once, and the massive steroids that were injected twice.
Yes.
And my situation, which was up to 101 temperature, something like that, right? And kind of a real effect on breathing. I had a pretty severe effect on breathing.
You had
and I had
pneumonia.
I had double pneumonia. I wouldn't say I was cured, but the symptoms were largely gone after 2 days.
Yes.
And 2 days, and in those 2 days, I got remdesivir. I got 2 big shots of steroids, and I got the whole Regeneron treatment, which was then very experimental. I mean, I was like one of the few people who had gotten it right after the president.
Right. What really helped you was those steroids, which fight against the inflammation in your
they
lungs,
make you feel
so you
great,
can
too.
breathe better. And also what's called pulmonary toileting. You had to breathe
that was
into
my son.
exercises.
My son Andrew stayed with me for 3 days. He was the only one allowed to stay because he had it. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is he going to know about this? Because he worked with the president. He knows a lot about government and politics. He was a professional golfer. He was fabulous.
He was your nurse.
He got instructed from you, my doctor, the president's doctor.
Every hour you were doing what's called pulmonary toileting, expanding your lungs.
I don't like that word. So I think this is very, very helpful. And I think I'm going to sum it up for people. And that is, nobody should be afraid of the vaccine. They shouldn't be, doing this crazy anti-vaccine stuff like some people do. Should be dealt with as an adult and in a scientific way, to the extent that anybody can be scientific. And you should get the stats, and you should take a look at what you want to do. I mean, it reminds me of when I had to go through prostate cancer. I went to too many doctors, but I sat down, I put all the statistics in front of me. I picked the 2 doctors I trusted the most, and I sat down with them. And after 45 minutes, we made a decision. And the decision was not 100%.
Right.
You're not going to make a 100% decision on this. Nobody is. But you make the best decision you can. But you should know all the facts. You shouldn't go ahead and do this and not know that in England and in Germany, they got real problems with this vaccine for that 12 to 20 age group. You should know that.
Right.
And then you should decide. I mean, maybe your 12 to 20 has so many other illnesses that make them vulnerable. You're going to want to try to do it.
Yeah.
So it does put a burden on people to do some of their own decision making. And it certainly means government should stop the hard sell.
Right. And just be transparent with all information.
But they're not. They're doing a hard sell.
Yeah.
They're doing a hard sell, which is that, you don't get into the school unless you're vaccinated. You're not going to be able to travel unless you're vaccinated. You better get a vaccination card, as if it's the answer to everything. And it seems to me that that's not scientific. That's political. Well, in any event, doctor, I think this will be very helpful to people because
I hope so.
Really, what you're doing is you're not making a decision for them at all. You're telling them this is not going to be as easy as you think. You just can't. You can't. First of all, don't go by television.
Yeah.
Number 2, don't go by newspapers. Sit with your doctor, get the stats, do a little bit of independent research, and then make a calculated risk determination.
Amen. That's what we should be doing.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. So I think this was enormously helpful. If it wasn't, or you've got questions, you know how to get me, right? You just go to rudyscommonsense.com and tell me your questions of what you think you would like to be covered, or do you mind giving them how to get you,
yes,
Dr. Ryan?
At drmariaryan.com.
So you go to Dr. Maria Ryan directly, and she'll, if she can, answer it. I mean, I can see, I get these sometimes, and she probably gets them much more often. You will text me and say, should I or shouldn't I?
Right.
I can't tell you that.
I can't tell you.
I can tell you a process. I mean, people for years have been calling me about prostate cancer. I must have talked to 200 people about prostate cancer since I had it. A lot more way back when my book was out, and it had a lot of description of that. And I always tell them I cannot make, all I can tell you is the decision I made. I can tell you the process I went through. I can tell you not to be as concerned about it because honestly, there are a lot of good decisions to be made here. There's never a perfect decision, but there are a lot of good decisions to be made here. Here, you should actually be thankful that you have a decision to make about a vaccine and about medicines. We didn't have that when this all started. That's a good thing. So react to it that way, and don't, I hate to say this, don't let the government push you around. I don't know what's going on with the government, but to try to pressure people in a situation in which this is still an experimental medicine, and at least in certain cohorts there are problems, that's not right. Process it, make a decision. I'm not sure I can tell you what the right decision is, but you'll figure it out. And I feel like I've made the right decision for myself, and because I've thought about it, and you do the same. Might be a good process to follow for the rest of your life, for everything else. Well, this is Rudy Giuliani. I want to thank Dr. Maria Ryan for once again really elucidating it in a way we can understand it And I want to thank you for paying attention to it. And again, if you have any further questions, rudyscommonsense.com, and we'll be back with Rudy's Common Sense just in a few days. Thank you.